Well, hello, everybody, and welcome into the Saints Insider Podcast. Today is Wednesday, August the 9th. I am Zach Ewing, along with the stars of the show, Rod Walker to my right, Jeff Duncan below me, and Luke Johnson in the corner. As Jeff noted, a young-looking Luke Johnson. Did you like Fountain of Youth? I don't know what that's supposed to mean. He's calling you young-looking. If that means the rest of the time it's not the case, or what?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm supposed to be looking old now that I've got a newborn at home, right? Not getting any sleep or anything. I'll take it, though. I appreciate it, Jeff. Thank you.
Look, in 2 weeks into camp, he looks fresh. I know we had a day off, but come on.
It's like Jameis Winston, man. You know, Jameis cut the hair and shaved everything, too, and he has that same look. So.
Took some years off. Looks good.
That in the business is what we call a tease, because we're going to talk about Jameis, who has not exactly found the fountain of youth at this year's training camp, among other topics that we'll get to. Saints are approaching their first preseason game coming Sunday at the Dome against the Kansas City Chiefs, who probably will not play Patrick Mahomes, but the Saints starters are supposed to play. So we'll talk about that. We'll also go into some training camp battles. Saints still looking possibly to sign Kareem Hunt, Anthony Barr. Those guys are still on the market. They came to New Orleans for visits, so we'll talk about that. And we'll also talk a little bit of what the story, Jeff, you broke yesterday about the Saints possibly moving training camp next year. So I think that's as good of a place as any to start. And I mean, look, we all know it is hot out there, and it's hot pretty much everywhere in this country at this time of year. But what we've experienced the last couple of weeks in New Orleans is above and beyond comfort level, above and beyond, hey, tough it out and deal with the heat. It's dangerous out there, and it's draining for the players, and it maybe contributes to injuries. And so the Saints, they may at some point soon be saying no mas, Jeff.
Yeah, look, and I think the impetus to this is the construction project they're going to have on their campus. I mean, they're going to renovate their cafeteria. They've still got the original cafeteria that was built there, I think, 2 decades ago, and they've outgrown it. And so to do that project, to complete that project, which the cafeteria, if anybody's been out to the Saints facility, it sits adjacent to the indoor facility. So the construction project is going to affect the indoor facility, and they're talking about adding a second floor to the cafeteria and incorporating it into the indoor facility to where they can have a viewing area. If you've been to that indoor facility, there's not a lot of room, and it's one of the problems they have when they do move indoors from the outdoor fields. It's very difficult to get a lot of fans in there, to get a lot of people in there besides the team and the coaching staff. So I think that more than anything else is going to force their hand. They're going to have to probably take camp on the road 2024, maybe 2025, but for sure 2024. And so while they're there, I think they'd like to find a place, maybe they can call their own long-term. But I think the plan right now is just to find a place for next year and see where it goes from there. I don't think they've thought that far down the road. But certainly I think the heat that we've experienced, I don't think it's going to get a whole lot better. I mean, certainly it's record heat right now. We're probably not going to get this bad. But with global warming, the trends all across the country, it's certainly, I think, a concern. And then we always are dodging tropical storms and hurricanes. I know just in my years covering the Saints, they've had to evacuate or move to different cities multiple times. I remember going to San Antonio, dodging a hurricane. Of course, they went to Dallas a couple of years ago for Gustav and Ida. And then they've also gone to Indianapolis for Gustav. So it's a constant disruption to their plans where you don't have any of that problem if you have a camp somewhere in a northern climate that's more conducive, I think, to being outdoors. So all these things factor in. But let me just say one final thing. I know I'm rambling here, but it's a very politically sensitive topic too. The Saints, got a lot of public money to build that indoor facility, and I think state legislators would love to see them use it as often as possible, especially to have a chance for the home fans to see the team. So that the team and certainly the management and ownership are sensitive to that.
Dennis Allen, not surprisingly, was not real forthcoming in his answers about this today, Luke. But if there's one thing I think we all know football coaches love, it's control. And if you move camp somewhere where the weather is normally better, you can control that a little bit better. You can control what your players are doing outside of camp. And there's a lot of positives to that.
Yeah, from a football standpoint, I think it makes a lot of sense. And on top of that, it's just, I think from a team bonding standpoint, I think it makes sense. Right? I thought we saw the guys get pretty close in, I guess, what was that, the 2021 season when they evacuated for Ida. I was part of that. They were all together all the time out there in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And I think we've seen it even in the regular season when they've gone on some of these West Coast trips, like when they went up to Seattle. What was that, the 2019 season, I think, when they were up there for out on the West Coast for like 10 days. We saw the team get pretty tight. Then they went out and won 5 straight games with Teddy Bridgewater. So I think there's clear benefits to this from a football standpoint. I think it's hard to look at it in that lens, though, and just through a pure vacuum. There's a lot of other things at play here. Obviously, they'd like to have it out in front of their fans, but a chance to not worry about the weather when you're out there. I mean, they've had guys going down and missing practice time because of heat-related stuff. It's dangerous out there for players. It's hard for us even to just stand out there and watch practice, just standing there still. I can't imagine running full speed over and over and over and over again while you're wearing pads and helmet and all that stuff. It's tough. I think it makes complete sense for them to move it.
Look, if you read the, I think it's Albert Breer's Monday Morning Quarterback column this past week, he was at Steelers camp and I think talked to Mike Tomlin. They go away. The Steelers go away to camp every year to a small, I think, college in the area. And Mike Tomlin specifically talked about that as what he believes is a competitive advantage for their team for exactly what Luke was talking about, that they get away, they bond. I know that was what Sean Payton liked about it. That it gives them an advantage because it's becoming so infrequent now. I think only about 7 teams now go away of the 32. He feels like it's an advantage. And, some of the top teams in the league do this every year, the Chiefs, the Bills, the Cowboys, the Steelers. So it's obviously, not affecting their ability to be successful.
And having a chance to do that, I got a chance to go to the Greenbrier in West Virginia. I guess those 2 of the last 3 years. And, the weather was perfect every single day. And I think the players really appreciated that. So. But I do think – oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Rod.
No, I was going to say, I don't know how the players feel about, relocating and being – sometimes you're away from your family if you're not taking your spouse and kids with you. I don't know, what the drawbacks of that is, but I know sometimes the players probably don't like that aspect of it.
Well, look, that's a really good point, Rod. And I don't think a lot of people know this. It hasn't really been written about, but this year is the first year I can ever remember that the players are staying at home. They're not going to a hotel. Even a year ago, they started out camp in a local hotel and then, broke camp, if you will, after a few weeks. But this year, especially the tenured players, those are the ones that get that opportunity. They're at home with their families. And that's something Dennis Allen's done differently this year. And I'm sure they would prefer that, even with this heat and humidity, being there with their families, no question about it.
The natural question is, where would they move it? And if there's construction next year, it at least has to go somewhere for one season. The Greenbrier obviously has been in the Saints' past. They've been to California. They've been to La Crosse, Wisconsin. Any leads, Dunk, on where they could go? I mean, I know the Greenbrier is probably the first place that comes up in those discussions.
No, I think it's way too early for that, Zach. I think they're just now considering what their options are going to be. But they do have to get on that somewhat quickly because these places, you can't just book it overnight, right? I mean, you got to have a lot of lead time. There's competition. The Browns went to the Greenbrier this year. So you have to kind of book that months, if not a year in advance. So it's something I'm sure they're going to start working on. But I get the sense, just talking to people in the building, that they kind of want to find someplace different, someplace to kind of put their stamp on, sort of the way Jim Moore and Jim Finks did with La Crosse. So it wouldn't surprise me if it was something completely different than what we're all speculating on right now.
We do have an idea where they won't be next year, though, right, Jeff?
Yeah, Jerry says Millsaps, and Dennis Allen put the
right on
kibosh
cue
on that. He's He said it will not be Millsaps, because to me, it's not a whole lot cooler up there. I mean, like, what are you really escaping?
No, the hottest I've ever been at camp is Millsaps by far. I mean, they had a 2 fields, and one their actual practice field down below the field turf was so hot that Sean Payton refused to practice on it after a couple of tries because it just radiated heat. So they stayed up on the upper field. It got a little more breeze up there. But there's also some issues, I think, with the dorms. These operations have gotten a lot bigger, even in the last decade, 15 years. And I say the operations, I mean, there's just way more support staff, more coaches, just more people involved. I think they've kind of outgrown Millsaps, to be honest with you. And you're right. One of the conversations I had the other day about this, the top priority is, other than the NFL level facilities, is the climate. And Millsaps doesn't help you there.
Well, I think maybe the answer, and you mentioned the Browns, is kind of a hybrid model. You go somewhere for a week, maybe 10 days, then you come back home when preseason games start, and you can have some practices for the fans, and maybe you get the best of both worlds at that point. But we'll see. As you say, it's a full year away, but they do need to kind of make some of those decisions as soon as possible. As far as this year's camp, again, preseason starts Sunday against the Chiefs. We're going to dig into that a little bit, but a couple of things to talk about first. And one is on Monday, and I guess yesterday as well, the Saints brought in Kareem Hunt and Anthony Barr, former Pro Bowlers at running back and linebacker, for visits to try to sign them as free agents. And there was even a report out there, Diana Rossini of ESPN said, hey, they're going to sign if they pass their physicals. And neither one of them did. They both left town without a deal. Kareem Hunt, however, they just reported he left Indianapolis without a deal today as well. So maybe the Saints are back in that picture. But I think more importantly, guys, what does it say that the Saints are still looking at these positions? We know they've had injuries at both places, but is there concern about depth there?
I think at linebacker, you definitely should have some concerns just with because that was a position I was concerned about even heading into camp, and then Andrew Dowell goes down, and Demario Davis has missed. I guess this was his 3rd straight practice with an injury, dealing with his calf issue. So I do think they do have some depth issues at linebacker. I was a bit more surprised about the, them bringing in running back, but I'll let Luke or Jeff address that aspect of it, I guess.
Well, I think at running back, I was surprised. I was surprised that it was somebody like Kareem Hunt, just because, he's a named guy. You kind of expect him to have maybe a little bit better situation out there than coming in and filling in for Alvin Kamara while Alvin Kamara is out. Because I don't really understand where he fits in that picture otherwise. They like what they have in Jamal Williams and Kendra Miller. Alvin's only going to miss 3 games. And I think you can look at it and say, well, maybe Kareem will fit into the kind of pass catching role. He's more proven in that capacity than Jamal Williams or Kendra Miller while Alvin's out. Maybe he's insurance in case either Jamal Williams or Kendra Miller gets hurt. But then you start to wonder, where does he fit in after week 3 is over? I don't really know exactly how that works. But Anthony Barr made sense. I mean, they are outside of Demario Davis and Pete Werner. They don't really have anybody on this roster who's proven they can play at a high level in the NFL as an off-ball linebacker. Dennis Allen was saying he liked what Zach Bond had shown in that Sam position, but he's still a little bit of a liability in coverage right now. I don't think you can put Zach Bond there at Will or Mike. And beyond him, I think your options are DeMarco Jackson, who's essentially a rookie. He missed all last year with an injury. And some guys like Ryan Connolly, or guys who haven't shown they can do it at the NFL level. I think it's a concern for him right now. It's a 2nd straight year it was, but the last year they were out signing Kiko Alonso and a bunch of other guys trying to get them to fit in, and then Caden Ellis comes out and has a huge season and gets rewarded with a big free agent contract. So you just never know, but they are looking for somebody who they feel they can really trust in that position if it comes to it.
Yeah, I talked to DA about that today, and he made it clear that, this isn't something that they're losing sleep over. These aren't like huge high priority items. It's more wants than musts, if you will. They want to get these positions filled, but I think the biggest issue is just the guys that are behind the starters, Nephi Sewell and DeMarco Jackson, just haven't played a lot in the NFL. They don't have much on tape, and so as a head coach, you'd always like to have a proven commodity to fall back on just in case you have to go that route. And I agree with Luke. I mean, I think the running back situation is, I mean, that's like a worst case scenario if you get down to that. I mean, you've gone through 3 backs basically. So I don't. And look, if anybody watched Kareem Hunt play last year, he's in the Kareem Hunt that we saw a few years ago. I mean, this isn't the guy that's going to come in at this stage. I mean, he's probably the best you can find on the market other than a Dalvin Cook, who's going to cost way out of the Saints' range. They're not going to be in that market. So you're looking for a role player that has to understand what he's going to be coming into with the Saints. That this is Alvin Kamara's backfield, and you're basically coming in for a cameo appearance early in the season as a backup. So it's hard to get somebody to want to do that too, and to find the right pay range. So it's they're trying to thread the needle on this. So it didn't surprise me that they weren't able to reach a deal with either guy.
You're listening to the Saints Insider podcast here on Wednesday, August the 9th. At least that's when we're recording it and broadcasting live. Do this a couple times a week throughout the season, both on the NOLA.com Saints YouTube channel. So check that out. And also on that channel every day after training camp, Luke has been posting the 2-minute drill, just quick takeaways from practice. One I thought was interesting, Luke, from Monday was about the 2-minute offense. And you brought up a stat that's really unbelievable, even to those of us who have followed the Saints. One time in the last 2 minutes of the game over 2 full seasons, one time have the Saints gotten points in the last 2 minutes of the game. And that was the season opener last year against the Falcons when they won that game. That's an area, we talk about turnovers and injuries and those sorts of things. That's an area the Saints have to improve if they want to get where they're going. Lucky for them, I think they have a guy at quarterback who's pretty adept at that.
Yeah, you look back since Derek Carr entered the league in 2014, right? And Pro Football Reference keeps track of fourth quarter comebacks and game-winning drives. And Derek Carr has more of those in both categories than anybody else in the NFL since that time. It's a loaded stat. Sometimes these quarterbacks are playing for good teams are often playing in front, and they don't have to come from behind. Derek Carr has not been on a lot of really good teams, but I think historically he's been a guy who's very comfortable in those high-pressure situations. And I think the first time we saw him operate the 2-minute offense, he was really, really smooth. I think he went 6 for 6 in that practice drive and let him down there for, what was like a go-ahead field goal. He wasn't as smooth today, but I think it's still an area where they have to be better because there's not really getting worse than what they have been in the last 2 years. I think if you even include the 2-minute drives at the end of the first half, they have almost as many turnovers on those drives, which is 7, as they do drives that ended in points, either a touchdown or a field goal, which is 8. They have to get better at that. The NFL, the margins are so thin in the NFL that if you're not able to put those 2-minute drives together and get quick points at the end of a half, you're going to have a hard time winning games.
Knowing that stat, I'm sorry, Rod. Just knowing that stat that they have seven turnovers and 8 scores in the last 2 minutes of the half, it's amazing they're even as mediocre as they have been. I mean, you hear that stat and you think that's a god awful team. Yeah,
and that's the thing is that's the thing about this team. I think that some of these numbers they've been just atrocious in. They were god awful at forcing turnovers and turning the ball over last year. Their kicker had a really down year. I mean, really 2 straight years of kicking game hasn't been very good. They've dealt with injury after injury after injury after injury, and they were still in the playoff hunt both of those years. So I just
amazing.
You just wonder if they can get this stuff figured out. Like, how good can they be? I don't know. But that's stuff that you would imagine putting a veteran quarterback in, getting some better injury luck, getting some better luck in the turnover thing. If Will Lutz is able to put the last couple of years behind him, I mean, maybe they can be pretty good. But that's also, hoping everything else stays the same. It's hoping the aging defense can still play at the high level. There's just a lot of variables here, but I think they're making the right strides to turn around some of the areas that they've been really, really deficient the last 2 seasons.
I think that line between good teams and bad teams in the NFL is pretty thin anyway. And what bad teams do are all those things that Luke mentioned, and that's usually the separator. So, yeah, they'll have to get those fixed. Going back to the 2-minute offense, though, I think what we have seen the past 2 days is just a high usage of the tight ends, which kind of what you expected. But, there was a lot of passes to Juwan Johnson on Monday, 3 passes during the 2-minute drill. Today it was a lot of Derek Carr to Jimmy Graham. So it was good to see those tight ends being used like that. And personally, I think the tight ends have been one of the bright spots in this camp so far. I think that was a position that I was concerned about before camp. And then obviously, they brought in Foster Moreau and Jimmy Graham and signed them in the offseason. So I think they've really upgraded at that position.
Let's be careful here before Jeff gets on a Taysom Hill tangent.
Yeah, Taysom Hill. When Taysom Hill's your 4th tight end, you're in good shape at tight end. I think that's the strength of their offense right now. I really do. I mean, they've got 4 good ones there. I mean, really 5 with Lucas Kroll, who I know is out right now. But you all make great points. I think what's clear is Derek Carr is very comfortable in the 2-minute offense. He looks in command, in control, and that's something we haven't seen since Drew Brees was here. And if they can just turn around a few of those into points, this team's going to be in a lot of close games. I think they had 11 one-score games last year. They were 5-6 in those games. So if they just start getting a few more turnovers, make a few more field goals, convert some of these 2-minute drives, they should be able to win 3 or 4 more games. But this is also against a bad schedule in a bad division. I still don't know, in spite of all that, are they able to compete with the elite teams in the league? I think that's still a question we don't know about.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're getting home playoff games, then you worry about that at that point, right? Like
exactly.
you get there and you're happy.
That's the goal, right?
Yeah. But August is about optimism in the NFL, and the training. Every team thinks they're going to be better in training camp. There's a lot of sunshine, and the Saints are no different this year. I think people think they'll be better, especially against that schedule. Let's talk just a minute about one aspect of training camp that has not been good. We talked about Carr. Well, the second string quarterback, Jameis Winston. Rod, you and I were talking about this briefly today. He's just not had a good camp. I mean, it's been turnovers, it's been missed throws. What have you observed from Jameis Winston?
Yeah, it seems like every day we see the team drills. Well, not every day, but I mean most of the days when the offense is doing pretty well, you'll see Derek Carr come in and he'll have a pretty good drive. It often just seems it drops off a little bit when Jameis comes in, and I'm not sure if that has a lot to do with the second offensive line and the second defensive line, because the second team defensive line is probably a lot better than the second team offensive line. So that could, play a factor into that. And then, we see Jake Hayner come in as third string and the offense seems to be clicking again. But again, that could be maybe the third string offense and defensive line a little bit more even, I guess. So, but other than that, I mean, yeah, he's had his rough moments throughout camp, I feel like.
And he's a guy who everyone was – we talk about August optimism. A year ago, we were all talking about how improved he was, and this was really his chance to take the reins of the offense. And injuries got in the way of that, Luke, but he doesn't seem like he's on that trajectory right now.
Yeah, and, I think the thing that I constantly come back to when I'm watching Jameis is that he just good quarterbacks make things look really easy. Right. And usually that's because everything's on time, and that everything just doesn't seem on time when Jameis gets in there. And I think that's kind of what held him back. Even when he was in the starting lineup, it's when there's pressure or when there's a window that closes, things just kind of start to get a little bit chaotic. And then it's extending plays and trying to hope something opens up downfield, and it's just so different than this kind of offense that we grew accustomed to with Drew Brees, where it's hitting the top of his drop and the ball's out and he knows exactly where it's going. It's just disjointed right now with Jameis in there, and some of it might be the second team offensive line and thrown to second team receivers and guys he's not used to working with. I do think Rod makes a good point about I think the second team defensive line is way ahead of the second team offensive line. We're seeing some guys who could be starting level players in there. But it needs to be better. I think Jake Hayner's had a more impressive camp than Jameis has right now. But I still don't think that means we're going into the season talking about should Jake Hayner be the number 2 ahead of Jameis, because Jameis, he's easily the most experienced backup quarterback in the NFL right now, right? And he's been in this system now for 2020 was his first year, so this is his 4th season in the system. He knows what he's doing. I think they just need to get him on schedule. I think that needs to happen over these next couple of weeks.
Well, the good news is I think Derek Carr's missed less than a handful of games in his career, right? He's been very durable. I think the worst case scenario that I see, if you want to imagine the worst case scenario, you got a new left tackle and what could be a new left guard if James Hurst ends up winning that position or Andres Pete's not ready. That's your blind side of your Derek Carr. And the big struggles Trevor Penning's had is in pass protection. There's no doubt. I mean, Carl Granderson wears him out daily in practice. So that's your worst case scenario, Saints fans, is Carr goes down, you go to the backup, and we just see what I think both Rod and Luke said. It's just an inconsistency with Jameis. He can make some of the best throws you'll see, but there's not enough carryover from play to play. And I think a lot of it goes back to the fact that he's just not sure of himself, I think, on every given play the way you see Derek Carr. And that's probably why he's not the starting quarterback right now, is that inconsistency.
Just to be clear, though, and you hear fans say this because fans hear observations from training camp about how great Jake Hayner looked and how much Jameis Winston struggled. But just to be clear, none of us are saying that Jake Hayner is going to be the backup quarterback. Just to reiterate what you said, Luke, there's a lot of reasons why: experience, contract situation, rookie contract, etc. Is there any now? Having said that, Dennis Allen was asked that question or some form of that question today, and he didn't totally shut it down. He said nothing is inconceivable, I think was the quote. Is there any way, barring injury, that Jameis could get passed for that spot on the 2 deep?
I mean, yes, I think there is a way, but I mean, it's like a very, very narrow path to that point. I think Jameis would really, really, really have to struggle the rest of the camp and in the preseason games, and for Hayner to really shine for that to be like a legitimate conversation. I still think, Jameis is a really, really talented guy. I think they just got to get him right. I don't think he's been right yet during training camp. I think it's still there. I think he's still a good backup quarterback option, but they've got to do some work with him for sure.
Yeah, I don't think Jameis can lose the backup spot in training camp. I mean, he could. The only way I think he loses it if we get into week 5 and Carr goes down, and kind of like what Luke or Jeff said, but he'd have to really struggle for Hayner to pass him. I just don't think that could happen in training camp.
No way. I mean, look, DA is a pretty conservative guy by nature. We've talked about him wanting veteran players. He's not going to go stick Jake Hayner. This is a huge year for Dennis Allen, right? I mean, it's kind of a tipping point for his career, I think. So he's not going to put that on the shoulders of a rookie 4th-round draft pick. No, he's going to go with the guy, what he knows, and they'll frame the offense around what Jameis can do. So, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves.
And I'll also say Dennis is a guy who hedges a lot in the media. Like he's never going to be the guy to completely slam the door shut on something unless it's really obvious,
Right.
Like Jameis beating out Carr. I mean, obviously Carr is going to be their starting quarterback, right? But so I don't want to read too far into those comments from him either.
Yeah, fair enough. We'll get to see both of those guys, really all 3 guys, I guess, on Sunday. So let's talk about the Saints preseason game against Kansas City, their preseason opener Sunday at the Superdome. It's at noon, NFL Network. DA said over the weekend, hey, starters are going to play, and that includes Derek Carr. Your guys' guess on, is that just a series? Is that one drive and then they're out of there?
I think it depends how it goes. I mean, it's usually how these things work. If the first team offense goes out there and puts together a scoring drive, I think that'll be their day. But this is a little different situation. You got a different starting quarterback and a new offense. So maybe, if they throw a second down touchdown pass to Chris Olave, maybe they want to get them a few more snaps. I don't think there's a set limit, but I'll be surprised if they play more than 2 series. I'd be shocked. I think they want to get a lot of time to evaluate some of these backups because this team's got a lot of competition right now. I think there's more competition at this camp and more open jobs than I've seen the last few years for those last 4 or 5 roster spots. And I think that's what this game and the next 2 will be about.
Yeah, and I'll also add that they have joint practices coming up the next 2 weeks against the Chargers next week and against the Texans the week after that. They're going to get a pretty good evaluation of their starters in those. And I think maybe it's kind of why I think they're playing their starters in this preseason opener. Because maybe they get to see what they want to see in that. They see what they want to see in the joint practices, and they don't have to play them in the games after that and risk them getting hurt. So I think Jeff's right on. I think 2 series sounds about right, but I don't think they'll go a whole lot more than that this preseason.
You certainly don't want to get an injury in a preseason game. First team position battles: James Hurst versus Andres Pete at left guard, and then Paulson Adebo versus Alontae Taylor at corner. But again, you're not going to go get, especially Andres Pete, who's already hurt. You're not going to run him out there and try to get an evaluation this Sunday. So having said that, Rod, what do you look out for Sunday's game? What will you have your eye on?
The matchup you mentioned, the Alontae Taylor and Paulson Adebo, just because, I was kind of looking at some of the Kansas City Chiefs, some of their highlights from their camp, and Justin Ross, their receiver in his second season, he's had a really good, it seems like every day they're talking about him. And I just kind of want to see how he matches up against Adebo or Taylor or even Marshawn and just see how those guys do. But that Adebo right now, I give the edge to Adebo, a slight edge, and I think Alontae will end up playing in the slot corner position. But I'm really looking forward to seeing how Justin Ross matches up against Adebo and Alontae Taylor.
Yeah, I tell you,
anything else, guys?
Well, look, a guy to watch that Rod pointed out in his column this week, and I know Luke's pointed him out, is Ike Yadam. I mean, this is a guy that when I talked to Dennis Allen after practice today, he unsolicited brought his name up. He thinks they go 5 deep at corner, that is the strength of their defense. So Rod makes a great point. I mean, watching these, whether Pat Mahomes plays a down or not, watching the receivers that Kansas City has going against these Saints DBs, I think will be a good gauge for where they're at. That seems to be strength on strength in this game.
What do we expect the crowd to be like? It has been a preseason of optimism, but if you looked back in the summer, I mean, and any preseason game is not going to be a sellout. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. But do you see like some optimism and people showing up to see Derek Carr's first game in a Saints uniform and all of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the crowd's going to be a lot better because DA said the starters are going to play.
Yeah,
I think people are going to show up to go see Derek Carr, even if it's only for 8-9 plays. I know. I mean, if I were a fan of the Saints, I'd probably want to go to that game and just see that firsthand. I'd probably be a little bit more pumped about this than other preseason openers.
Yeah, I think this game's got more appeal than the final against the Texans. I don't think anybody's going to come to that game. I mean, if you're going to come to a preseason game and you're amped, like you said, sunshine, rainbows, everything, everybody's optimistic, this is the one to go to. It also is a little bit of a trial run. They got a renovation going on at the Superdome. There's lots of things to see, the new renovations, figure out how to get the new, entries into the stadium. There's a lot of reasons for fans, I think, to want to come to this one more so than maybe the finale.
And it's a noon game, which probably helps a noon on a Sunday as opposed to a 7 o'clock game on a Thursday night or something. So I do think there are some things that will have you more crowd than normal.
All right. Well, we're looking forward to it too. We will have our first Saints Insider postgame show after Saints and Chiefs on Sunday. So tune in these same channels, YouTube, Facebook, the whole bit. We're going to take some of your questions. These guys will all stop by. I'll be on the field hosting this thing, and they'll stop by with what they heard and what they thought. So join us then. Check out Luke's 2-minute drill, and we'll be back with a full podcast, we think, on Monday to kind of dissect Saints Chiefs and look forward to the team's trip to LA. So that'll do it for us. This has been the Saints Insider Podcast. Rod Walker, Jeff Duncan, Luke Johnson, and myself, I'm Zach Ewing. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time.